prepare my throne. And these four dudes like with the things on the shoulders. Hello everybody, welcome back to another episode of Business Blaze. I heard that climbing Mount Everest was super crazy expensive. I asked Danny to write us a script about that, so we're gonna find out all about it today. Let's jump into it. Imagine taking that bold step onto the summit of Mount Everest. The snow crunches under your boots as you take that triumphant tiptoe onto the roof of the world and survey the tranquil vista of mountain ranges stretching in every direction. Far removed from the rest of civilization, thousands of feet below you, this is a moment shared only between you and the mighty mountain you've conquered. Well, this is probably how it used to feel a few decades ago. Nowadays, it's more likely to feel like you're standing in a queue for the toilets at an overcrowded music festival. It's reached the point where I've often thought about opening up a hot dog stand at the top of Earth's highest mountain. I did actually hear this. I heard that Mount Everest has just got like, you're up there, and you're up there with like a million other people, all just in a line. It's like, yay, I'm at the top, and then you go back down, yay, I'm at the top. Instagram moment at the top of the world. I read, I'm not entirely, maybe Danny will get into it, but I read that you can actually get internet reception at the top now. My friends tell me there would be logistical problems in frying sausages at an altitude of nearly 30,000 feet, but I still reckon I would make good money if I could thrash out the potential teething issues. I think you can't cook so high up because things can't get hot enough, right? Because the pressure's not high enough. I mean, that's just boiling water. Who knows? The exact height of Mount Everest is 29,029 feet, or 8,848 meters. Located on the border between Nepal and Tibet in the Himalayas, the tallest mountain in the world is not necessarily the toughest mountain in the world to climb. That title would probably go to either K2 on the China-Pakistan border or to Annapurna 1 in Nepal, but Mount Everest is definitely in the top 10. It's not simply a stroll up a steep hill. The mountain was first officially conquered in 1953 by Edmund Hillary and Tenzing Norway of the British Mount Everest expedition, and the decades that followed saw very little other action on the supremely challenging peak. It's incredible, like no one had been up there until 1953. That just like is a real statement of how difficult this mountain was to get up. Like, it took, we knew it was tall. I'm sure many people tried to get up it. No one succeeded until 60 years ago. We had built planes before we managed to climb this mountain. Throughout the whole of the 1970s, only 78 people made the epic climb. This all changed in the 1990s when taking a trip up Mount Everest suddenly developed into a popular commercial venture. It's now reached the point where almost 1,000 people a year are snapping up deals with guide organizations to make the jolly trip. It no longer appears to be the exclusive domain of the seasoned explorer and mountaineer. Instead, it's become something to cross off your bucket list or, get an Instagram photo. And like 1,000 people a year is a lot. And I bet they're all rich. Which begs the question, can absolutely anyone just climb up Mount Everest these days? Well, firstly, if you were thinking of just turning up on your own one morning with a good pair of boots, a flask of orange juice, and boundless thirst for adventure, then you won't get very far. The very least you'll need is a climbing permit issued by either the Chinese or Nepalese authorities, depending on which side of the mountain you're intending to climb, and this alone costs thousands of dollars. That's no equipment, nothing like that, just literally permission from the government to go up the mountain is thousands of dollars. So there are these two main routes to the summit, and debate rages over which side is the most practical and which is the most treacherous. The Nepal side, or southeast route, is by far the most popular tourist climber, and it's here where most of the commercial guide services have taken off. Over on the Tibetan side, or the North Ridge route, the Chinese government are already slapping tight restrictions on climbing expeditions, slashing the number of climbing permits issued every year, and pricing the whole thing out of the pockets of all but the fabulously wealthy. In other words, if you're an inexperienced climber looking to conquer Everest, you'll almost certainly set off from Nepal, but either way, you're going to need an official permit, which costs a minimum of $11,000. Holy shit. Like you said, a few thousand, 11,000s. Yeah, you could have money. And then all of the extra shit and plane tickets and all of that jazz. Woo! Any attempt to climb the mountain without one will mean that you won't get rescued when you hit trouble. You'd be like, no, I don't need to pay that £11,000. I'll be totally fine. What could possibly go wrong? And then it's like you get stuck on the mountain, you're like, please rescue me. So essentially, it's like a really expensive insurance policy, but you're doing something quite dangerous. You'll also find yourself in serious legal hot water, and you could risk a lengthy prison sentence. You might even be on the receiving end of the commonly reported vigilante action from the guides or sherpers who patrol the foot of the mountain looking for reckless idiots who don't bother getting a permit. I wonder what their do you get beaten up by Nepalese sherpers if you try to climb the mountain? Okay, so let's talk money. Even if you attempted the more tourist-friendly and cheaper route from Nepal, you're still likely likely to need a pretty fat bank account. The average cost of an expedition by a guide service is around $45,000 in total. This may seem like a lot, it does, but the money gets spent wisely. It covers the permit, the Sherpa guide fees, climbing gear, vital supplies, and performance-enhancing drug. At least you get something good for your money. I remember when it was on Top Gear, right, where they drive those cars to the top of the mountain, and they take Viagra, because apparently it works it does something so you can help deal with high altitudes or something. It also includes vital oxygen bottles, which cost around $500 a piece on their own. And you need at least 5 or 6 of these to have a good chance of making it back down alive. So it seems like, yeah, you can climb it on the cheap, but you'll die, and you'll get into big trouble, and then they won't rescue you because you didn't buy a permit. Apparently you can go economy and find a deal for as little as $20,000. That does not qualify as economy, Danny. But this might include skimping on crucial essentials like oxygen. Not generally recommended, as only 3% of climbers manage to reach the summit without extra oxygen bottles, and 40% of fatalities are blamed on lack of oxygen. I think that Norgay and Hillary, they made it up without oxygen, I think. It probably was before that, right? On the whole, when you're planning one of the most dangerous expeditions that it's possible for a human being to take, and one which has already claimed more than 300 lives, this is probably not the best time to save a few quid here and there. Going to the other extreme, you can pay as much as $200,000 for a luxury VIP experience. They better bloody be carrying me up for $200,000. It'd be like, prepare my throne. And these 4 dudes with the things on the shoulders. You don't exactly get carried up the mountain off a 4-poster bed. It's still a tough ordeal. I feel like for $200,000, I kind of should be maybe there's you know those things that parents have when there's the baby in the back, in the backpack. I feel like I'd need one of these. But you do get a lot of help along the way, with a whole team of Sherpas carrying every bit of equipment for you, including a whole banquet of extra oxygen bottles, and they'll also prepare all your meals and ensure that you have plenty of bandwidth for your Instagram posts. I don't think he's joking. I think you can get Instagram, you can get internet up on the top of Everest. It's time to check my facts. Found an article from Vice. How to use the internet on the summit of Everest. Yeah, you could use a sat phone. They have internet. Oh wow, this is about a guy who actually climbed Everest. You shouldn't be watching this video. You should read this Vice article. Oh, it's really long though. Okay, it seems you can't quite get it at the summit of Everest, but you can get it around and near to the top. And apparently they do use it for the useful purpose of checking the weather reports and stuff. Before they only could use sat phones. But then if you're spending, let's say you're spending $200,000 to go up Everest, in the most luxury way possible. Satellite phones are ridiculously expensive, and using the internet on a satellite phone is insane. But you're rich, and you absolutely can do it. So you could Instagram from the top of Everest. All the useful things in life. But whichever package you choose, it's fair to say that you're not going to get a chance to attempt the climb unless you've got some serious money to spend. Yeah, even on the lower end, 20 grand. Woo! But assuming for a moment that, like Simon, you've got a big pot of money to burn, what about rules and regulations? Jesus, I don't know, I would really bulk at 45. 20 feels okay, it's a big experience, climbing Everest. I wouldn't pay 45, I definitely wouldn't pay 200, and I wouldn't pay 20, to be fair. I'm not gonna pay 20 grand. There's better things to spend 20 grand on. Climbing up Everest 20 years ago might have been cool. But now it's kind of yeah, everyone knows it's easy. Or not easy, but I think people do even think it's easy. So it's not even cool anymore. Is it perfectly legal for just about anyone to buy an expedition to climb Mount Everest? Surprisingly, the answer at the moment is pretty much yes. You don't need to pass any sort of medical or fitness exam, and you don't even need any proven experience or training. You just need a fistful of cold, hard cash to persuade some less scrupulous guide services to help you get up the summit. There's been much talk and speculation about tightening up regulations a little. As recently as 2019, the Nepal authorities have put forward a series of proposals which may or may not get approved at some point in the future. These include a strict age limit of between 18 and 75. How is that a strict age limit? How old? You have to be an adult and not really old. And imposing a ban on solo climbers, blind climbers, or double amputee climbers? Double amputee climbing of Mount Everest, absolute hero. Believe it or not, both blind and double amputee climbers have conquered the summit in the past with a little help. In fact, when I was at school, we had a talk. Every Friday afternoon, I think someone interesting would come in and give a talk, and one of them was, I think it was a guy who was a quadruple amputee, or maybe it was just a double amputee, he was missing both of his legs. He'd climbed Mount Kilimanjaro. And one of my friends had gone to climb Mount Kilimanjaro the year before, and he hadn't made it up to the top. And the guy with no legs was talking about how, because there's, with Everest, there's a tourist route and there's a non-tourist route. And this guy who was missing both his legs was yeah, we went up the non-tourist route because, anyone can climb up the tourist route. It's hey, Mike, I was climbing Kilimanjaro. More significantly, the new proposals include potential climbers having to prove that they have climbed a peak of at least 6,500 meters before being allowed anyone near the foot of the highest mountain in the world, which would clearly limit expeditions to experienced climbers only, because 6,500 meters is high. Whether these proposals ever get passed into law remains to be seen. Nepal is an impoverished nation and may be reluctant to pass any new stifling restrictions on an industry which is currently generating big money from tourists. Yeah, it's got to be good to have Everest in your country because you got 1,000 people climbing up that every year and you're charging 11 grand for the permit alone, not to mention all of the tourist dollars that are coming in anyway. It's like $11 million. That's good money. But as things stand right now, a 120-year-old blind double amputee with no climbing experience or training of any kind with an intense phobia of snow can legally buy a permit to make a solo trip up the mountain. I'd like to think that someone somewhere might make an intervention at some point, but it's legally acceptable on paper. That's pretty crazy, but I get it, it's business. Like, you can sell someone the permit, they can try and get up it, like, knowing full well they're gonna make it to like the first way station up the mountain and then turn around, and you still make your 11 grand. I'll be like, okay. However, let's look again at the wording of my original question. If I was asking if anyone could buy and attempt to climb Mount Everest, the answer is absolutely a resounding yes. But if I was asking could anyone successfully climb Mount Everest, the answer is a resounding no. This is most definitely not an expedition for everyone. Speaking as someone who gets a bit out of breath when walking up the hill to the shops for a pint of milk, it's definitely not for me. For Danny, I could do it. I could do it no problem. I'm fighting fit. Not really. I think I mentioned it in a video previously about gyms. The last time I went to the gym was like 6 years ago. You need to be at the absolute peak of your physical condition. You'll be dealing with 100-mile-an-hour winds, minus 30-degree temperatures, and 8,849 meter ice falls. You'll be fighting frostbite, avalanches, and altitude sickness, as well as fighting for breath. Yeah, what was that movie they made a few years ago about those people who got stuck on Everest? That was intense. That was like back when it was serious. The whole experience was once described a bit like running a marathon every day for a month, but with someone covering your mouth and nose so you can't breathe. On top of that, you'll also need a lot of good luck and keep your frost-bitten fingers crossed that the conditions go your way. Professional marathon runners have failed to climb on multiple occasions due to adverse conditions, whereas less fit people manage to make it all the way to the top. And that's the thing, like, if the conditions are not good the day that you're supposed to climb and then they don't get better, you're out your 45 grand. And that's like, you just gotta come back next year and try again and pay again. It's not great. And then it's like, I did make it. That would suck. Paid 45 grand and you can't even take that Instagram picture at the top. Much of the outcome relies on chance, but you'll obviously stand a much better chance if you're fully prepared for one of the most challenging tests of endurance you're ever likely to undertake in your life. Hundreds of people may have conquered Mount Everest, but hundreds more never get past base camp. So, in conclusion, yes, anyone with a lot of spare cash can currently make a legal attempt to climb Mount Everest, but whether they'd have a snowball chance in hells of making it to the top is a completely different story. Good news, bonus facts, slightly morbid bonus facts. I'm betting this has got something to do with the bodies on Everest. The first recorded deaths claimed by Mount Everest were of 7 porters who perished during an avalanche in a failed 1922 expedition. Since then, more than 300 people have died before reaching the summit. Over 250 bodies remain perfectly preserved on the mountain as they are too dangerous or downright impossible to remove, giving Mount Everest the official title of the world's largest open-air graveyard. I think also the dead bodies in colorful clothes, they act as like markers on the way up because, you know, it's all really white. And they'd be like, oh yeah, there's the body with the green boots. He's like halfway up or whatever. And it's like, you need to go past him. And then, you know, at the guy with the purple shirt, take a left. We seem to be hearing more and more tragic news about stories who have died during attempts to climb Everest. And this is naturally because more and more people are making the attempt. But the actual death rate is actually shrinking. Since first conquered in 1953, around 4% of climbers have died trying to climb the mountain. But this has fallen to 2% in the last decade and is fast approaching 1%. Okay, that's really small. A small chance of death. Even 4% is not bad. In comparison, the total death rate for people attempting to climb Annapurna 1, which is the hardest mountain in the world, is 25%. So, like, you attempt to climb that mountain, 1 in 4 chance that you're gonna die. You go with 4 mates, 1 of you is gonna die. Actually, more likely that all 4 of you will die, or like, there's a 25% chance that all of you'll die, then like 1 of you dies because, you know, you'll get caught in an avalanche or whatever. To end on a slightly more upbeat note, we've been pronouncing it wrong all these years. Really? The naming of Mount Everest is a bit of an embarrassing mess. Although it was already known by different local names by the Tibetans and the Nepalese, it was officially named Mount Everest in 1856 in honor of British surveyor George Everest, a man who never saw the mountain, let alone climbed it. Classic British. Let's go to a country and rename To make matters worse, the name actually ended up getting pronounced wrong. Anyway, George Everest's surname was actually pronounced Everest. There you go, so it should be Mount Everest. That was this episode of Business Blaze. Now you know you can go climb Mount Everest if you got 45 grand. Or 20 grand if you're feeling cheap and risky, or 200 grand if you want to basically be carried up. This has been it. I feel like this used to appeal to me a lot more, the idea of climbing Mount Everest, something I could do in my life, but now it's kind of just turned into a bit of a tourist affair. What do you feel like is the new equivalent of climbing Mount Everest? Is there like one of those things that is like, wow, you know, still a challenge? Let me know in the comments below. I'd love to hear from you. Suggestions for Business Blaze, also leave them in the comments. We'll get Danny to write us something up and make a video on it. And as always, smash that like button. Don't forget to subscribe, and I'll see you next time.